Welcome to Life Stories, where real-life experiences teach us valuable lessons about empathy, leadership, and growth. In today's story, we follow Ethan Mitchell, the CEO of Hearthstone Bakery, who takes a bold step to uncover the truth behind the scenes of his own company. What he discovers about the workplace culture and the struggles of his employees leads him to make life-changing decisions. Join us as we explore how Ethan redefines leadership and rebuilds a company from the ground up, all while learning profound lessons along the way. Subscribe to our channel to begin today's story. Ethan Mitchell, the CEO of Hearthstone Bakery, had always prided himself on the success of his company. What began as a small bakery in the heart of Denver had blossomed into a thriving chain of 50 locations across Colorado. He had built the company from the ground up, painstakingly crafting recipes, building relationships with suppliers, and ensuring that every product that left the bakery was perfect. He was proud of what he had created, and even more proud of the employees who had helped him along the way. But over the years, as the company expanded and the demands of running a larger business grew, Ethan had drifted further away from the everyday operations. His time was consumed by meetings, emails, spreadsheets, and investor concerns. The bakery that he had once known so intimately, every corner of the kitchen, every face behind the counter, had become something distant. The joy of baking, of building something from nothing, had given way to the pressures of scaling and managing a business. And in the process, something had been lost. Whispers had reached his ears: low morale, high turnover, and increasing customer complaints. Reports from his managers painted a picture of everything running smoothly. After all, the numbers were good. The sales targets were being met. Yet, something didn't sit right with Ethan. He couldn't shake the feeling that the heart of the business, the very soul of Hearthstone Bakery, was slipping away. It wasn't just about the profits. It wasn't just about the bottom line. Ethan had built his company to bring joy to people, to his employees and his customers alike. But now, it felt like something was broken. Frustrated and tired of second-hand information, Ethan decided to do something radical. He would see the truth for himself. He would go undercover. The idea seemed both thrilling and daunting. He knew that the staff at his bakeries would never recognize him. Ethan had become a polished figure in the public eye, well-dressed, clean-shaven, his image frequently appearing in company newsletters. But that image would be of no use here. Ethan's plan was to join the ranks as a lowly new hire in one of the busiest stores in Boulder. The plan was simple: blend in, observe, and discover what was really happening behind the scenes. With a trimmed beard, dyed hair, and a pair of glasses, Ethan transformed himself into someone unrecognizable. He was no longer the confident, polished CEO. He was just another employee, a man eager to learn the ropes of the bakery world. He stepped into the bustling bakery one morning, wearing the standard black apron, the Hearthstone Bakery cap pulled low over his forehead. The place was humming with activity, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. The sound of the mixers, the chatter of customers, and the scent of fresh-baked goods filled the space. But beneath it all, something felt off. His first day was overwhelming. The bakery was packed with customers. The orders piled high, and the staff moved quickly, but with an air of exhaustion. The manager, a no-nonsense woman named Linda, greeted him with a curt nod before handing him off to one of the employees for training. Linda didn't seem interested in offering much support. Her attention was elsewhere. Barked orders at the staff while seemingly turning a blind eye to the chaos around her. Ethan's trainer, a young woman named Sarah, gave him a weary smile. "Don't worry. It's not rocket science," she said, though her tone betrayed the fatigue she was carrying. She was quick to show him how to prep ingredients, how to organize the baking station, and how to keep the flow going during the rush. Her hands were cracked and red from hours of kneading dough, and her voice, though friendly, held the weight of someone who had been working far too long without a break. As the morning rush hit, Ethan was swept into the chaos. The bakery seemed to be in constant motion, baking, packaging, serving. The staff scrambled to keep up with the demands of customers. And Ethan could see the strain in their eyes. The tension was palpable. And he could feel it in the air. The pressure mounting as the orders piled up higher and higher. Sarah moved seamlessly from task to task, taking orders, delivering pastries, and helping others as they fumbled through their own mistakes. But despite her best efforts, the sense of order was slipping away. "Sarah, why don't you take a second to breathe?" Ethan suggested during a brief lull. She shook her head, her eyes tired but resolute. "If I stop, everything falls apart. That's just how it is here." Her words hit Ethan harder than he expected. There was no room for rest in this place. No space for recovery. Just relentless work. One shift after another. As the day went on, the atmosphere became even more suffocating. Ethan had expected hard work. But what he saw was something else. The bakery felt more like a pressure cooker than a place of joy and creativity. It wasn't just about making pastries, it was about survival. And it was clear that Sarah, along with many others, was barely holding on. When lunchtime came, things only worsened. Ethan overheard Linda snapping at one of the new employees, a teenager named Mia. "Pick up the pace, or you'll be out of here by the end of the week." Linda's voice cut through the air, harsh and unforgiving. Mia's face turned pale, her hands shaking as she struggled with a tray of croissants. Ethan's heart tightened as he watched the girl try to steady herself under the weight of Linda's cruel words. But he stayed quiet for now, observing the dynamic. Later that afternoon, while carrying a stack of trays to the back, Ethan froze. He heard the sound of quiet sobbing coming from the storage room. His instincts kicked in, and he quietly walked toward the sound. Peering around the corner, he saw Sarah sitting on an overturned crate, her face buried in her hands. She looked completely defeated. Ethan stepped closer, his heart heavy with empathy. "Sarah," he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. She flinched at the sound of his voice and quickly wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "Sorry," she mumbled, her voice cracking. "Just give me a minute." "Okay." She tried to hide her pain, but Ethan could see it, the exhaustion. The weight of endless shifts. The overwhelming pressure to keep everything running. "What's going on? Are you okay?" Ethan asked, crouching beside her. There was no judgment in his voice, only a quiet understanding. She hesitated for a moment, then sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I've been working back-to-back shifts because we're short-staffed. And Linda keeps piling more on me. I asked for a day off last week, but she said if I couldn't handle it, I should quit. But I can't afford to quit. I need this job." Ethan's chest tightened. He had heard glowing reports from Linda about the efficiency and happiness of the team. But the reality he was witnessing was far from what was being presented. No one should be treated this way. No one should be left to struggle in silence. Alone. Carrying the burden of a toxic culture. "You shouldn't have to deal with this alone," he said firmly. Sarah gave him a sad smile. But there was a weariness in her eyes that spoke volumes. "It's just how it is here," she said. "But I'll get back out there before Linda starts looking for me." As she stood up, Ethan felt a surge of anger mixed with deep regret. He had built Hearthstone Bakery to bring people joy. To create a place where people could feel valued, both employees and customers. But somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of that. And now, he knew it wasn't just about observing. It was about fixing what was broken. The following morning, Ethan arrived at the bakery before dawn. He wanted to witness the start of the day, the calm before the storm. As it were, there would be no customers lining up yet. No rush of orders to manage. He wanted to see how the day began, how the team organized themselves before the chaos took over. When he stepped inside, the bakery was eerily quiet. The staff preparing for the morning shift. Sarah was already there, setting up the pastry case, Her movements were slow, deliberate, and Ethan noticed the weariness in her eyes that hadn't been there the previous day. It was as if the weight of all the work was gradually taking its toll on her. "Early morning?" Ethan asked casually, trying to keep the conversation light. She glanced up, giving him a small, tired smile. "Most people try to come in as late as possible, but I like to get ahead before the madness hits." Ethan nodded. Smart. But he couldn't shake the image of her face from the day before, the way she had collapsed emotionally in the storage room, struggling to hold it together. There was something deeply unsettling about the fact that she had felt so overwhelmed, so unsupported. And yet, her outward demeanor was always calm, always professional. As Sarah continued to set up, Ethan took a few moments to look around. The bakery felt different in the early morning hours, quiet, almost serene. But beneath that surface calm, Ethan sensed an undercurrent of tension. The weight of unspoken frustrations hung in the air. Soon, Linda, the store manager, arrived, her presence immediately changing the atmosphere. Linda didn't greet anyone warmly. Instead, she marched to the counter, checked the inventory list, and then began barking orders at the staff. She didn't ask if anyone needed help, she didn't inquire about how the team was feeling. She simply directed, demanding that everything be done her way. Ethan's heart sank as he watched the exchange. Linda didn't inspire respect, she instilled fear. And that fear was palpable. He could see it in the way Sarah, MIA, and the other employees moved through their tasks, quickly, but with a sense of dread. Always looking over their shoulders. Never quite sure when Linda would unleash her criticism. As the morning rush approached, Ethan observed the way Linda handled the staff. Sarah, already stretched thin, was expected to juggle both the front counter and the kitchen. There was no support from Linda. No offer of assistance. Sarah's exhaustion was visible. Her movements slower as she struggled to keep up with the pace. But she kept going because that's what was expected of her. She didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. At one point, MIA, the new employee, fumbled with a large coffee order. She had clearly never handled an order like this before, and it was easy to see she was getting flustered. Linda, who was standing nearby, immediately pounced. MIA. How hard is it to remember no foam? You need to pay attention. Do I need to show you how to read an order slip? Ethan felt his stomach turn. He could see Mia's cheeks flush with embarrassment, her hands trembling as she tried to correct the mistake. She mumbled an apology, but it was clear that the damage had already been done. The way Linda spoke to her wasn't constructive, it was a public humiliation, meant to make MIA feel small. Ethan's mind raced. This wasn't management. This wasn't leadership. This was bullying. Plain and simple. The atmosphere in the bakery grew more oppressive as the morning wore on. Sarah was doing her best to keep things running smoothly, but it was obvious she was overburdened. MIA was on the verge of tears again, and another employee had called out sick. And Linda. She continued to stand at the front, her attention focused solely on the register, barking orders at the employees who were already stretched too thin. Ethan decided it was time to confront the truth. He had seen enough. As the lunch rush began, he approached Sarah, who was manning the front counter while also trying to keep the pastry display stocked. She was juggling multiple tasks at once, but her focus remained sharp, her hands steady. Sarah, if you could change one thing about how this place is run, what would it be? Ethan asked, keeping his tone casual, as if it were just another question. Sarah paused for a moment, looking at him with a mix of hesitation and wariness. She glanced around the bakery, ensuring no one was within earshot. Finally, she sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping. We need more support, she said quietly. Better schedules, more staff, and a manager who actually helps when things get crazy. Linda just makes everything harder. Her voice wavered slightly, but there was no mistaking the frustration she was feeling. But nothing's going to change. Corporate doesn't care about people like me. Ethan's chest tightened at her words. What if they did care? Sarah gave him a skeptical look. Then they'd have to prove it. Her words struck him hard. She was right. If the company truly cared about its employees, it would show in the way they treated them. It would be evident in the way the management team operated. But instead, Ethan had allowed the company to become a machine focused on metrics, on sales, on growth, without ever considering the people who made it all possible. As the day wore on, Ethan's thoughts grew heavier. He had come to this bakery to observe, to uncover the truth. But now he knew that the problem wasn't just the manager. It was the culture, the entire environment that had been created over time. If one store was this bad, how many others were suffering the same way? When the day ended, and the last customer had left, Ethan sat in the quiet of the bakery, reflecting on what he had learned. He couldn't ignore the reality any longer. There was no longer any question in his mind. Things had to change. The company, the employees, and the customers deserved more. They deserved better. And he would be the one to make sure that happened. Tomorrow, he would take the first step toward fixing what had been broken. The following day, Ethan couldn't sleep. His mind raced with everything he had observed, everything he had learned in just 2 short days. He couldn't ignore what he had seen in the bakery. It was a wake-up call. A stark reminder that the company he had worked so hard to build was not in alignment with the values he had once held dear. He had become so caught up in the numbers, the spreadsheets, the investor reports, that he had lost sight of what truly mattered: the people. The heart of Hearthstone Bakery was its staff. And right now, that heart was broken. That morning, as he prepared for work, Ethan made a decision. He wouldn't just stand by and let things continue as they were. It wasn't enough to merely observe the problems, he had to act. He needed to fix this. Not just for the employees, but for himself too. He had built this company to create joy, not stress and pain. It was time for a change. By mid-morning, Ethan called an emergency meeting with his executive team. They were all gathered around the large oak conference table in the corporate office. And the atmosphere was tense. None of them had seen Ethan this serious before, especially not this early in the day. His usual confident demeanor was now replaced with a quiet, but determined energy. "We have a problem," Ethan began, his voice steady but sharp. "And it's bigger than I realized." His second-in-command, Linda, raised an eyebrow. "What kind of problem?" Ethan took a deep breath, then launched into what he had witnessed. "I spent the last 2 days working undercover at one of our busiest locations in Boulder. What I saw there was unacceptable. Employees are overworked, undervalued, and demoralized. The manager, Linda, is running the store like a dictatorship. She belittles the staff, drives them away, and creates an environment where fear rules over respect." There was a heavy silence in the room as the executives absorbed what Ethan had said. They had all relied on reports and metrics, confident that everything was going smoothly. But now, the truth was inescapable. "Linda," Ethan continued, his tone colder now. "She's been in charge of that store for years. And we've been too focused on sales figures to see what's been going on behind the scenes. We need to take immediate action." One of the executives, a woman named Karen, spoke up. "But what about the store's performance? It's still hitting targets. Are we sure this isn't just one bad manager?" Ethan shook his head. "No. If one store is this bad, I can't assume it's an isolated issue. We need to launch an internal review of all locations. Effective immediately. No more relying on reports that can be manipulated. I want every district manager in the field, observing stores firsthand. We need to know what's really going on." The room grew even quieter as the gravity of Ethan's words sank in. For the first time in a long while, his team realized that Ethan wasn't just talking about improving numbers, he was talking about rebuilding the company's culture from the ground up. I'm also going to handle Linda personally, Ethan added, his voice firm. If what I've seen is true, she's done. The team nodded in agreement. Ethan's reputation for fairness was well known, but so was his intolerance for behavior that went against the company's core values. They all knew he wasn't making an empty threat. As the meeting drew to a close, Ethan's mind was already focused on the next steps. He couldn't wait. That afternoon, he made his way back to the bakery in Boulder. But this time, he wasn't undercover. This time, he was there as himself, the CEO of Hearthstone Bakery. When he walked through the door, the staff barely recognized him. They had grown so accustomed to seeing him in his disguise that his sudden appearance in a tailored suit, with no apron and no glasses, caught them off guard. Sarah, still working behind the counter, did a double-take when she saw him. MIA froze in the middle of pouring a latte, nearly spilling it. Linda, who had been lecturing another employee about cleaning the tables faster, turned to see what had caused the sudden silence. Her face went pale when she recognized Ethan. "Mr. Mitchell," she stammered, clutching her clipboard tightly. "What brings you here?" Ethan didn't answer her directly. Instead, he turned to Sarah and MIA, offering them both a warm, reassuring smile. "Can you two step into the back for a moment? I need to speak with Linda privately." Sarah and MIA exchanged nervous glances but obeyed. Leaving the room, Ethan's gaze never left Linda as they made their way to the office at the back of the bakery. The tension was thick. Linda knew what was coming, and Ethan wasn't about to waste any time. Once inside the cramped office, Ethan shut the door firmly behind him. He wasted no time with pleasantries. "I spent 2 full days working undercover in this store," Ethan began, his voice steady and cold. "I saw how you treat your employees, how you belittle them, how you overwork them, how you create a culture of fear instead of respect. You leave early while the team stays behind to pick up the pieces. I've seen enough." Linda opened her mouth to defend herself, but Ethan cut her off. "Save it. I've heard enough excuses. You've been here long enough to know better. I trusted you to lead this store in a way that reflects our values. But instead, you've done the opposite." He took a deep breath. "Effective immediately. You're terminated." The words hit Linda like a slap. She opened her mouth to argue, but something in Ethan's eyes stopped her. She knew this wasn't negotiable. Without a word, she gathered her things and left the office, her head hanging low. As the door closed behind her, Ethan stood still for a moment, absorbing the weight of the decision. He had made the right choice. It wasn't just about Linda's behavior, it was about the future of the company, the well-being of the employees, and the return to the values that had originally driven him to start Hearthstone Bakery. Stepping back into the main area of the bakery, Ethan saw Sarah and MIA waiting anxiously. He approached them both with a new sense of resolve. "I owe you both an apology," Ethan said sincerely. "You've been working under impossible conditions, and it's clear we as a company have let you down. That changes today." Sarah blinked in surprise, and Mia's eyes widened in disbelief. "I'm making changes," Ethan continued. "Effective immediately. We're going to fix the staffing issues here. You won't have to work double shifts just to keep things running." "And Sarah," he said, turning to her, "I want to recognize how much you've done to hold this place together. Starting next week, you'll be promoted to assistant manager, with a pay raise to match." Mia's jaw dropped. "Wait. What? Are you serious?" "Very serious," Ethan replied with a smile. "You've earned it." The atmosphere in the bakery shifted in an instant. The weight of the past few days seemed to lift, and a sense of hope began to settle in. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like he was doing something that truly mattered, not just for the business, but for the people who were the backbone of that business. As the weeks passed, Ethan watched as the bakery transformed. Sarah, now the assistant manager, took on her new role with determination and a renewed sense of purpose. The bakery was no longer a place of constant stress and fear. Instead, it became a space where the employees felt valued, supported, and motivated to do their best. With better staffing and improved schedules, the team was able to work cohesively, and the atmosphere in the bakery was brighter than ever before. Customers began to notice the change as well. The service was warmer, the staff more engaged, and the quality of the products even better. The once strained relationships between management and employees were now a thing of the past, replaced by open communication and respect. Ethan's decision to take action, to listen to his employees, and to invest in their well-being paid off in ways he hadn't imagined. When Ethan walked into the bakery one morning, he was greeted with smiles and genuine appreciation from the team. He realized that his journey back to his original vision for Hearthstone Bakery had been worth every challenge. He wasn't just running a business anymore, he was part of a community, a place where people cared for one another, where hard work was recognized, and where joy was found not only in the pastries they baked but in the relationships they nurtured. Ethan knew there was still more work to do, but he was no longer afraid. He had rediscovered the heart of his company, and that was a feeling worth fighting for. To follow more inspiring stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for new life stories.